Okay, we're going to use our oxidation numbers to identify the processes of oxidation and reduction. But before we can identify them, we have to know what they are. So historically, oxidation was something reacting with oxygen, hence the word oxidation. And so it was gaining oxygen. Think about like iron being oxidized to form rust. That was kind of a historic example of oxidation. And reduction was thought of either as the loss of oxygen or as the gain of hydrogen. And so these definitions are not current, and they're really not incorrect so much as they are incomplete. So fast forward to the point that we actually now know about electrons, and we have our modern definitions. So we can remember this little mnemonic device, oil rig. Oxidation is the loss of electrons, and reduction is the gain of electrons. So remember that electrons are negative. So if oxidation is losing electrons, is losing negative charge, then that oxidation number is going to increase. It's going to become more positive as we lose those negative electrons. And reduction, well, reduction came from the word, or deals with the reduction in oxidation number that corresponds to a gain of electrons, a gain of negative charge. Okay, so another mnemonic device that some people like is Leo the lion goes grrr. So again, losing electrons, oxidation, Leo, gain electrons, reduction, grrr. So whichever one works for you, or you can just learn it, either one's great. Okay, now let's talk about agents. We have oxidizing agents and we have reducing agents. Well, the oxidizing agent is the substance that gets reduced, okay? So an agent facilitates something. If you're an athlete and you have a sports agent, they facilitate deals and contracts for you. And so an oxidizing agent facilitates something else being oxidized. Well, since that something else has to lose electrons, this substance will gain them, and by accepting those electrons, it allows something else to be reduced. Reducing agents are things that get oxidized, so they lose electrons and allow something else to be reduced, something else to gain electrons. Okay, let's actually try this, because it sounds like doublespeak, huh? So here we have, in our first example, we have sodium and chlorine reacting to form sodium chloride. So there are electrons transferred here, and the best way to see this is to actually identify those oxidation numbers. So we do that, and we see, sure enough, sodium goes from a 0 to a positive 1, and chlorine goes from a 0 to a negative 1. So sodium lost an electron. It was oxidized. And chlorine gained electrons, so it was reduced. Okay? Since sodium was oxidized but allowed chlorine to be reduced, sodium is the reducing agent. Since chlorine allowed sodium to be oxidized, it is the oxidizing agent. Okay, let's try this example. So we have the combustion of methane to form carbon dioxide and water. Well, we see that oxygen goes from a 0 to a negative 2. That's a gain of electrons, so oxygen is reduced. And carbon goes from a negative 4 to a positive 4, so it's oxidized. It loses electrons. And so since it was oxidized, CH4, methane, the thing that contains carbon, is our reducing agent. Okay, it allowed oxygen to gain electrons. And oxygen is our oxidizing agent. It allowed carbon in methane to be oxidized. So let's actually try a couple examples. These are in your notes. Okay, we are asked to identify the oxidizing agent, reducing agent, substance oxidized, substance reduced. Your first step in any of these is to assign oxidation numbers. So take a minute and do that, and then you restart the video. Okay, hopefully you got these numbers. Then we look for change. Well, here it's pretty obvious who changed. So if I look at iron, it went from a 0 to a +3. So that means it lost 3 electrons. It was oxidized. And oxygen was reduced. So we identified the substance oxidized, the substance reduced. I always do those first and then come back to the agents, just from the way I think about it. If you can go straight to the agents, great. Order doesn't matter. So the oxidizing agent is the substance that was reduced. So here it's oxygen. And the reducing agent is the thing that was oxidized. So here it's iron. Okay, let's try another example. So take a minute, assign your oxidation numbers, and then you can press play again. Hopefully this is what you got. And so we look for changes. We see that iron went from a +3 to a 0, and carbon went from a +2 to a +4. So we have carbon being oxidized and iron being reduced. And then we've got to figure out our agents. Okay. The agent is the whole reactant. So although carbon was what was oxidized, it's carbon monoxide that is the reducing agent. And although iron was reduced, it's the iron oxide that was the oxidizing agent. Okay. Try this one all on your own, and then you can play and check your work. So there's your oxidation numbers, who's oxidized and reduced, and there's your agents. And now you're ready for some practice.